We live in a world that, well, it pretty much constantly encourages us to talk about our work.
Oh, absolutely.
Just think about it for a second. Our social feeds are they're filled with it. Documentation of the grind.
Right. The signals of effort, the whole narrative of the hustle.
And it creates this weird pressure. If you're not posting about your progress, if you're not talking about it, are you even really doing the work?
And that, right there, that's the central paradox of productivity today, isn't it?
It really is. We get rewarded, through likes, comments, affirmation, more for the announcement of the work than for the actual action.
It's a kind of performance anxiety, but it's totally internalized and then amplified by all that social engagement. We're basically conditioning our brains to go looking for that external validation for the intent to do something, not for the thing itself.
Which drains the energy you need for the actual achievement.
Exactly. But if you pull back for a second and look at, the greatest breakthroughs in history, we're talking deep mathematics, foundational physics, even huge global businesses, they almost always required the creator to do the exact opposite.
To just go silent.
To go completely silent.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's go deep on this. We've done a pretty extensive dive into sources that all suggest the highest level of achievement requires actively silencing all that noise.
It's about replacing that constant effort narration with something concrete, something undeniable, the output.
And our sources give us this incredible kind of cross-disciplinary lens. We're looking at everything from, centuries-old mathematical proofs all the way to billion-dollar startup culture.
And our mission for you, the listener, today is, I think, a critical one. We want you to gain some actionable insights, but also, and this is crucial, the psychological context for how to protect your big, complex projects.
Protect them from what? Information overload.
That and from destructive premature social feedback. This isn't just about, being disciplined. It's a strategic survival guide for deep work.
It sounds like it's about shifting your identity.
That's it. It's about moving your personal identity and how the world sees you from being the person who is working really hard to the person who delivered the proof.
I love that distinction. Effort versus evidence. It's so sharp. And the core tension of this whole deep dive, it's captured perfectly in this epigraph we started with from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He wrote, "Don't say things. What you are stands over you the while, and thunders so that I cannot hear what you say to the contrary."
That sentiment, that really sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about today. The output has to be so powerful, so undeniable, that any explanation of your process just becomes, redundant.
It becomes noise.
It becomes noise. So we are going to look at several really distinct case studies to understand why secrecy, quiet focus, and timely submission are essential survival strategies for achieving real excellence.
Especially on those problems that take years, not weeks, to solve.
Exactly.
So, the core question we're really chasing today is this. Why is reporting our progress so often a substitute for actually completing the work? And how do we make sure our effort, all that hard work, serves the final result and not just our public identity?
I think we should jump right into phase one.
Let's do it. Silence as not just a quirk, but as a mechanism for deep incubation and maybe more importantly for survival.
And for this foundational idea, there is no more dramatic, no more instructive story than Andrew Wiles and his decade-long secret pursuit of Fermat's last theorem.
This is where it gets truly fascinating. So let's set the scene. We're in Princeton, New Jersey in the mid-1980s.
Right. And Andrew Wiles is already a respected, tenured mathematician. He's not some unknown.
He's publishing papers. He's attending seminars. He's got a healthy, conventional academic career path ahead of him.
The safe move, the smart move, would be to keep his work legible to his peers, to talk about it, to find collaborators, to, signal his progress on smaller, more manageable projects.
But he doesn't do that.
No. He chooses a path that our sources call professionally irrational. He decides to dedicate himself, in total secret, to solving Fermat's last theorem.
And we have to emphasize what that meant. This was a problem that had been around since 1637.
And it had famously defied, humiliated, generations of the world's greatest minds. It was known as a career graveyard.
So if he had announced this publicly...
Oh, he would have immediately sunk his own reputation. The weight of that historical expectation would have been completely intolerable.
He'd been fascinated with the theorem since he was a kid, right? Found it in a local library book.
Yeah, but as the sources point out, a childhood fascination isn't a strategy.
No.
In academia, strategy is public. It's grant applications, seminars, and that constant career-defining question. So what are you working on these days?
And for most people, their answer, their plans, become their professional identity.
And that's exactly the danger Wiles saw. He had to keep the plan completely separate from his identity. Then, in the late 1980s, a crucial doorway opened up.
This was because of the work of other mathematicians.
Yes, particularly a guy named Ken Ribet. Ribet showed this incredible, viable connection between Fermat's last theorem and a much more recent, very deep piece of math called the Taniyama-Shimura conjecture. It's now called the modularity theorem.
Okay, for those of us who don't follow number theory for a living, can you break down what that connection actually means? Why was it so important?
Sure. Think of it like this. Fermat's last theorem, it's pretty simple to state. It says you can't find three positive whole numbers, a, b, and c, that fit the equation a to the n plus b to the n equals c to the n if n is any whole number bigger than 2.
Simple to say, impossible to prove.
Exactly. Now, the Taniyama-Shimura conjecture is about something else entirely. These really technical objects called elliptic curves. What Ribet showed was that if Fermat's last theorem was false, if there was a solution out there, that solution would create an elliptic curve so bizarre, so mathematically strange, that it couldn't possibly fit the Taniyama-Shimura conjecture.
So if Wiles could prove the Taniyama-Shimura conjecture was true, at least for a big enough group of these curves,
then Fermat's last theorem had to be true by default. It was an indirect route. It shifted the attack from this single ancient problem to a modern but still absolutely massive problem.
a viable route.
A viable route. But his reaction to this incredible breakthrough, this is the key part. It was the absolute opposite of what our culture encourages.
He didn't tweet about it?
He did not announce his quest to the world. He treated the whole idea, as one source puts it, like a flame in wind. Shield it, starve it of drafts, keep it close. He started working in total secrecy.
And you're arguing this wasn't just him being an eccentric genius. This was a form of protective engineering.
It was a calculated survival strategy. If he had told the math world, he would have instantly inherited the full weight of the math world's noise. And we need to be really clear about what that noise is.
The sources outline a few things.
Yeah. First, expectations. The internal pressure, sure, but also the external pressure to succeed where literally hundreds had failed.
Then interruptions.
Right. Requests for papers, conferences, seminars. All of that would pull time and focus away from this one long-term goal.
And destabilizing suggestions. I find that one really interesting.
It's so subtle, well-meaning advice from peers who might, inadvertently suggest a false path or just introduce a tiny seed of doubt at a critical moment.
And the big one, the pressure to show results.
The pressure to publish smaller papers along the way to prove you're making progress before this huge, fragile 7-year proof even had a coherent shape. He had to build himself an invisible, soundproof wall.
And the physical reality of that wall is just so stark when you read about it. For over 7 years, his professional life had this quiet, almost repetitive shape.
He'd go to his office, do his required academic duties, and then go home to the real work.
Which was what?
Yeah.
Long stretches of total isolation, just pushing abstract symbols around, looking for a path that, for all he knew, might not even exist.
And he did most of this in his attic study.
And he told no one, essentially no one beyond his immediate family. This is the crucial psychological layer we have to understand. He wasn't just building a mathematical proof. He was building a private world sturdy enough to hold failure.
Because failure was the most likely outcome.
By far. Statistically, this quest was almost guaranteed to fail. He needed total insulation from the judgment that would have come from spending 7 years on a problem that produced, in the end, nothing.
That creates a kind of integrity barrier, doesn't it? The motivational posters just say 7 years in an attic.
Right.
But the reality of that kind of secrecy is you get zero external applause. There's no one patting you on the back to refuel your tank.
No.
Yeah.
There's only that daily, quiet, internal recommitment. I'm still doing this, even if no one knows, even if this fails. It forces the work itself to become the main motivator.
Absolutely. If you don't get the social reward for the effort, you have to rely completely on the intrinsic reward of solving the puzzle, that deep satisfaction of making incremental progress that only you can see. It stops the work from becoming about identity seeking.
And then 7 years later, we get the first big moment. June 1993, Cambridge, England, the Isaac Newton Institute.
Wiles felt like he had finally built the bridge. He schedules a series of 3 highly technical lectures, sort of building blocks, and the entire mathematical world is watching every single equation.
The sources describe this escalating tension over the 3 days.
You can just imagine it. Wiles is building the structure of the proof, piece by piece on the blackboard, and the audience, which is full of the world's top number theorists, is tracking every single step. A private world was finally, carefully becoming public.
And the conclusion is famous for being this almost comical understatement after all that silent effort. The final minutes of the final lecture. Wiles reaches the end, he pauses, and he just says, I think I'll stop here.
And the room just erupts. It was the confirmation. A 3.5-century-old quest was over.
The silence was broken only when the output was undeniable.
But here's where the story gets even more instructive for our idea of silent survival. That first proof, it had a flaw.
Right. The first draft wasn't perfect. And what happens next is arguably the truest test of this whole silent survival strategy.
It really is. The math community, they're thrilled, and they start poring over this 200-page manuscript. And within a few months, a small but absolutely critical gap is found in one of the steps.
So the whole thing is now hanging by a thread.
A single thread. The pressure on him must have been just monumental. He'd already claimed victory in the most public way imaginable. His private world was now under the most intense scrutiny you can imagine.
So what did he do?
This is where he shows his mastery of silent focus. He could have published the flawed proof, defended it, played the academic game of peer review and incremental fixes. Instead, he withdrew completely.
He went back into a second period of total isolation.
Yes. For almost another full year, from late 1993 to September 1994. He went back to the attic. He told no one except for a former student, Richard Taylor, who worked with him in absolute secrecy to try and fix this critical error.
That second silence must have been even harder than the first.
Oh, much harder. The first one was fueled by hope and discovery. The second was driven by necessity and the very real threat of global public failure. He needed a private space sturdy enough to hold not just disappointment, but the embarrassment of an almost proof.
If he'd been narrating his progress all along, that failure would have been psychologically crippling.
But because his identity was rooted in the work, not the story about the work, he could retreat and just keep building.
And the breakthrough came, in September 1994?
Almost by accident. He was close to giving up, and he suddenly realized that a method that had failed him earlier could be used to save the whole thing if he just came at it from a different angle. The repaired proof was submitted quietly, and this time it held up.
That whole episode just proves the core argument. Silence is a survival strategy. It protects the work from the distraction of success and from the toxicity of failure.
He had to rebuild a $100 million building, and he did it under a tarp, away from the media and the commentary. He only lifted the cover when the structure was absolutely sound.
So what does this incredible story mean for the rest of us? This takes us right to the principle of protection, the difference between reporting progress and releasing output.
The sources define this so well. Reporting progress is that ongoing narration of your effort, the updates, your status, how you're feeling about it all.
And releasing output.
That's the finished thing, the thing that can stand on its own, the proof, the code, the delivered presentation. We confuse these two all the time. And worse, we treat the reporting as a substitute for the releasing.
We talk because talking feels like movement. It feels like we're being accountable. It feels like, identity confirmation. Look at me. I'm the kind of person who's going to achieve this big thing.
But the sources call this early talk a tax on your motivation.
And that tax gets collected by what we're calling the 3 quiet thieves, the things that steal your internal drive. Wiles avoided them perfectly.
Exactly. So thief number 1, the premature reward.
Okay, what's that?
When you announce your hard work too soon, or you tell a colleague about this massive goal you're tackling, you get that little social nod, that dopamine hit. Wow, that sounds ambitious. You're really grinding.
That feels good.
It feels great. But that quick, easy social approval can actually trick your brain into filing the goal as partly done. Psychologically, you feel seen, and you get the emotional payoff before you've done the actual heavy lifting.
This connects right to the psychological research the sources bring up from people like Peter Gollwitzer. It's this idea that when your intentions become public, especially if the goal is tied to your identity, like being a writer or a founder.
Right, an identity-relevant goal.
You experience this sense of social reality, a feeling of completeness before you've actually achieved the goal. You become the person who's going to write the book, even if all you have is an outline.
And that prematurely satisfied identity is so subtle, but it's often what kills long projects. Why would you invest another 80 hours of grinding, isolated work when your brain's reward center has already been paid off by a 10-minute conversation?
You've just reduced the motivational tension you need for the final push.
Exactly. Which brings us to thief number 2, the expectation spiral.
Once you've announced the quest.
The work itself fundamentally changes. It's no longer just about solving the internal technical problem. Now, you are also managing a story about the work for an audience. It becomes performance adjacent.
So your decision-making gets warped.
Subconsciously, yeah. You start making choices based on what will look good in the next progress update, the visible stuff, rather than what the proof or the code or the product actually needs. And what it usually needs is the invisible, difficult, unglamorous work.
You're optimizing for the audience's perception instead of the deliverables' integrity. I know I've done this. You work on the cool-looking features, so you have something impressive to talk about, but you leave the ugly but necessary structural work for later.
We all have. The focus gets diverted, and for complex work, that diversion is lethal. And that leads to the third thief, the distraction magnet.
This is the external stuff, the influx of input.
Right. People mean well, but once you go public with a big project, you invite advice, opinions, comparisons, and counter-suggestions from every corner of your network.
And all of that is just noise.
It's noise. For whiles, it would have been hundreds of well-meaning peers telling him which paper to read, which technique to try, or comparing his progress to other people's failures. The fragile, still-forming idea has to survive in that public air.
And every piece of unsolicited advice takes cognitive energy to process.
You have to process it, reject it, or integrate it. It just breaks your focus. While secrecy wasn't about being cryptic or arrogant, it was an act of engineering. He was engineering a protective environment. He just reduced the number of places the project could leak motivation or invite destabilizing input. Silence isn't hiding. Silence is the greenhouse for deep incubation.
That sets up our next phase perfectly. We've talked about silence as protection. Now we need to talk about the action required to break that silence, the moment of submission.
Right. Phase 2. Submission over signaling. And for this, we're going to move from deep, isolated mathematics to foundational physics with the story of Albert Einstein.
Bern, Switzerland, 1905. The year that becomes known as his Annus Mirabilis.
His miracle year. And Einstein's context here is so important because he had what you'd call the completely wrong resume for starting a global scientific revolution.
We have this image of the genius in a big university office with collaborators and resources. Einstein had the exact opposite.
He was not working from a prestigious university chair. He didn't have a fancy lab or a circle of elite academic patrons. He had a government job.
At the Swiss Patent Office.
A life of bureaucracy, stamps, specifications, technical reviews. His days were spent reviewing other people's inventions, often dealing with the tiny details of synchronizing clocks and electrical signals.
I mean, that environment seems designed to smother ambition, not foster it. It would make you doubt you could ever contribute to the forefront of the field. He was a total outsider.
So he had to lean on the one thing that doesn't require permission or public approval.
Deep private thinking.
Relentless, private, deep thinking. He built his revolution in the margins of his life, in the evenings, on his walks home, talking ideas over with his friend Michel Besso. The papers that changed the 20th century were mostly written in his tiny apartment on Cramgas.
And the key is what he produced. It wasn't a blog post about his ambitions. It wasn't a series of announcements. He wrote papers.
Actual, complete, technically rigorous objects. They had equations that would either hold up to scrutiny or they would collapse.
The sheer output in that one year, 1905, is just staggering. And it really highlights the power of this focused, silent submission. Let's just quickly list the 4 major papers.
Okay. First, the paper on Brownian motion.
Which was huge because
it provided the first real, testable, empirical evidence that atoms and molecules actually existed. It convinced the skeptics.
Okay, second, the paper on the photoelectric effect.
This is the one that eventually won him the Nobel Prize. He proposed that light energy comes in discrete packets, quanta, or what we now call photons. It was a foundational piece of quantum theory and completely challenged classical physics.
Right. Then third, the big one, special relativity.
The paper on the electrodynamics of moving bodies. It just redefined our concepts of time, space, mass, motion. It completely rewrote cosmic reality.
And fourth, the short little addendum that contained maybe the most famous equation in history.
Exactly. The one that connected mass and energy. E equals mc squared. a radical little consequence of special relativity.
4 world-changing papers, all delivered in quick succession, all produced without a lab, without a staff, and without a single press release about the effort involved.
And the entire ethos is revealed in this one tiny logistical moment, June 30th, 1905. The paper on special relativity is finished. He doesn't go on a speaking tour, he doesn't seek funding, he doesn't ask the world to admire how hard it was to think against the grain.
What does he do?
He simply delivers the final manuscript to the editors of the journal An der Physik.
You have to picture that scene. Not as a legend, but just the logistics of it. The pages are in order, the argument is as tight as he can make it, and it's the physical act of handing over work that can now be judged entirely without him being there to explain it or lobby for it.
That's the hinge. That is the total shift from effort to evidence. He submitted the work and let it stand where talk couldn't. He forced the artifact, the paper itself, to be the center of the discussion, not his personality or his ambition. The submission was the final, non-negotiable act.
Which brings us to the principle here. Narration is cheap, submission is costly. And that cost is exactly what makes it so powerful.
We are culturally trained to think of effort as a kind of currency. We expect narrating our effort to buy us sympathy or credit or admiration.
But effort is private.
Effort is private. Results are shareable, and often they're unforgiving.
Einstein's sequence was so disciplined, and it was born from this isolation. It was 1, think privately, 2, build something coherent and testable, and 3, submit it.
And submit it to the highest possible standard of review.
Submission is really the strategic opposite of signaling, isn't it?
Totally. Signaling asks for the reward up front. Recognize my grind, respect my effort, anticipate my success. Submission delays all of that reward until there is something concrete and testable in the hands of the audience.
It's the antidote to that false sense of completeness we talked about earlier.
Yes, you can't feel complete in your identity as a physicist until that paper is physically sent to the editor and hopefully accepted.
So when you commit to submission, you're trading comfort for clarity.
That's a great way to put it. You stop asking people to imagine your excellence, and you give them something tangible that forces reality to give you an answer, not just a sympathetic friend. If the paper holds up, it holds up. If the proof is flawed, it's flawed. The feedback comes from the quality of the artifact, not from a supportive audience cheering on the effort.
There's that Benjamin Franklin quote from Poor Richard's Almanac that sums it all up.
Well done is better than well said.
Submission is the moment the saying stops and the done begins. It's the bravery to present yourself for an objective critique.
And it forces you out of that comfortable zone of potential and into the arena of concrete results. That move is terrifying because submission carries the risk of rejection or harsh critique or failure, which is exactly why it's so much easier to stay in that comfy space of just narrating the process. Submission is the ultimate integrity filter.
But let's pause for a second. If Wiles and Einstein used this radical secrecy and solitary submission, how does this principle even work in the modern world? In the collaborative, chaotic world of business and scale, where team communication and visibility seem like they're mandatory.
That is the critical challenge. It's easy to say, go work in your attic if you're a mathematician solving a solitary problem. It's a lot harder when you have 1,000 employees.
Right.
But the principle translates perfectly. It just shifts to a focus on silent verification of utility over the public signaling of hype.
Okay, this moves us to phase 3, silent verification in business. And our first case study is WhatsApp and what you call their no-sign mindset.
Exactly. We're in Mountain View, California, around 2011. This is when Silicon Valley was reaching peak signaling culture.
Total peak hype.
And venture capitalist Jim Goetz, who was one of the few who got them early on, he observed something really essential when he went to meet the founders, Yan Koum and Brian Acton.
So most Silicon Valley companies at the time, they have the clever logo, the impressive lobby, the office that just screams, look how important, well-funded we are.
You've got the beanbag chairs, the craft beer on tap, the highly stylized branding everywhere.
And WhatsApp had?
None of it. No sign, no branded entryway, just this unremarkable, deliberately unsexy building. Goetz later said that Koum and Acton shunned the spotlight, refusing even to hang a sign outside the WhatsApp offices.
They weren't trying to win over the room. They were trying to win the network connection.
Their obsession was not publicity, it was utility. That was it.
So what were they obsessed with?
The unglamorous core product. Making sure a message delivered fast, clean, reliably for users all over the world, especially people on slow networks or using cheap phones. They were optimizing for stability, low latency, low data usage.
These are all things the user only notices when they break.
Exactly. And they require the hardest, deepest, most boring engineering work.
And this commitment to being anti-glamour, it was even formalized inside the company.
It was. Brian Acton famously kept this little note on his desk. It was like their private constitution, scribbled in all caps, and it served as their anti-distraction strategy.
It said, no 8S, no games, no gimmicks.
And that little note, it acted just like Wiles' invisible wall. It was a constant internal reminder that their hardest work would happen in places no one would ever applaud them for, optimizing a server, cleaning up code, reducing overhead.
If you don't court public attention, you don't have to waste time servicing the need for publicity.
You don't waste time doing magazine interviews or managing investor expectations with hype cycles. You just build.
And the outcome? Well, it speaks for itself about the power of this approach. WhatsApp reached this massive global scale with $0 spent on marketing.
Zero. The product was the marketing. They sold an outcome-reliable messaging, not the story of their grind.
Their success just became undeniable, unavoidable. The proof was in the user numbers, not the press releases, which is why Facebook eventually acquired them in 2014 for about $16 billion.
They built an artifact that spoke for itself. They achieved that kind of thundering proof that Emerson was talking about.
Okay, that's one perspective on silent scaling. Let's look at another business case that shows this quiet focus, but from an executive level. Sam Walton and the unannounced audit.
This is such a perfect metaphor for internal integrity. This is hard work that operates way above the level of public signaling.
So we're in Texas in the 1980s, and the story involves a store manager named Robert Doyle who gets a sudden phone call.
The voice on the other end just says, "Sam here. I'm at the airport and I'd like to see your store. If you come and pick us up, we'll tour your store."
And Doyle thinks it's a prank at first.
Of course.
Yeah.
But it's Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, calling like it's the most normal thing in the world for the billionaire CEO to just appear out of the sky in his private plane.
And that was the strategic key.
That was the whole method. Walton was an experienced pilot, and he used his license to make frequent surprise inspections of Walmart stores all across the country. These were not the ceremonial visits where the regional VP gets weeks to prepare a staged performance.
The purpose was silent verification.
Seeing what a real customer would actually see on a random Tuesday morning, without any chance for the managers to polish the performance or hide mistakes or overstaff the departments for a day.
While most executives want the polished data report and a clean slideshow,
Walton wanted the reality of the floor. He focused relentlessly on the basics: cleanliness, making sure prices were marked correctly, the state of the Action Alley, that main corridor with the high-impact merchandise. He was obsessed with operational truth.
the sources say he was famous for tracking specific items, these volume-producing items, or VPIs, like his favorite, moon pies.
Right. He didn't check to see if the store had followed a memo from corporate. He just checked the shelves to see if the system was actually working.
His version of hard work wasn't performative hustle or giving motivational speeches. It was quiet, systematic inspection.
It was about building a feedback loop based on reality, not on reporting. He knew that if the fundamentals were solid when he showed up unannounced, then they were solid all the time.
And there's that amazing integrity detail that really reinforces the whole ethos.
Oh, it's the best part. After touring Doyle's store, Walton has them open the snack bar for employees and customers to get free popcorn and soda. And after chatting, he asks his companion for cash, and he hands the manager, Doyle, $50.
And he says,
"If it doesn't cover it, call me and tell me what I owe you."
and Doyle, the manager, is just floored. He's thinking, isn't this your company?
But that tiny act showed that even the smallest standards of honesty mattered to the leader. Walton was modeling the behavior. Everything gets accounted for, even free snacks for employees. The system has to have integrity at every single level.
The lesson there is so clear. Hard work that needs an audience to exist is fragile. Hard work that survives a surprise inspection is real.
Walton built systems that kept his entire organization honest, and he did it by focusing on observable outcomes, not reported intentions. If you want results, you have to build feedback loops that don't require applause or preparation. You optimize for verifiable value, not for visibility. That is silent verification at the highest level of commerce.
This has all been incredibly useful. If we synthesize these four cases, they're so different. Wiles the mathematician, Einstein the physicist, Kuhn-Acton the startup founders, and Walton the retail giant. What's the common thread?
It's the commitment to letting the artifact speak for itself. Whether that artifact is a mathematical proof that closes a centuries-old question, or a theory that shifts a paradigm, or a global communication service that needs zero marketing, or just clean, well-stocked store shelves that make a customer happy.
The value is in the deliverable.
It's in the deliverable, not in the description of the difficulty.
Okay, so let's turn all of this synthesis into the actionable framework that you, our listener, are looking for. This is phase 5, synthesis and the artifact first toolkit. How do we take these lessons from these extreme achievers and apply them to our own projects or our reports or our management roles?
We can start by recognizing that we have to manage input and maintain a kind of secrecy during that fragile incubation phase. We have to use the principles Wiles used to protect the beginning of a great idea.
Okay, tactic 1, the one confidant rule.
For any major project, especially one that's tied to your identity or that requires deep, sustained concentration, pick only one person who knows the true, full scope.
And this person has to be someone you trust implicitly.
Yes. Someone who will respect the silence, who will not turn it into general conversation or a source of gossip.
And why only one?
Because it gives you that necessary pressure release valve. You have a critical sounding board to vent frustration or test an idea, but without creating the public pressure cooker that triggers the premature reward thief. You get high-quality feedback without the expectation spiral. Choose them for their discretion, not their ability to be a cheerleader.
Okay, next, we need to restructure how we even define progress for ourselves. You call it progress in artifacts, not adjectives.
Stop narrating, even to yourself, how hard you worked today or how motivated you feel. Instead, keep a private trail of tangible outputs, your own personal proof folder.
So, pages written, reps completed, lines of code that actually compile.
Drafts shipped, features logged. This makes sure your motivation comes from visible, measurable progress, not from some abstract emotional effort. You see the artifact itself growing, which reinforces that intrinsic reward that Wiles had to rely on.
And to actively fight that distraction magnet, we can implement silence windows.
Choose a fixed, non-negotiable window of time. It could be 7 days, 30 days, maybe even 90 days for a huge project. And in that window, you mention the project only to people who are absolutely necessary for its immediate execution.
And for everyone else.
For everyone else, colleagues, friends, social media, the project simply does not exist. If someone asks what you're working on, be vague, redirect. You are actively starving the flame of drafts and unwanted input.
But what about corporate life? I mean, we have to give updates to a boss or a client. We can't just disappear for 7 years.
In that environment, you have to replace updates with deadlines. If you must communicate, state a concrete future date of a verifiable release. Don't describe your current effort.
So instead of, I'm working hard on the report, you say,
I will share the first complete draft on March 1st, or the beta will be live for you to test on Friday. This shifts the whole conversation from your process to the deliverable. It creates accountability for completion without inviting all that commentary on your struggle.
I like that. And then the most important tactical principle, this is straight from Einstein's playbook, the submission standard.
Before you talk about your work, before you signal or narrate, just ask yourself one simple question. Can I submit something?
And if the answer is no?
Keep working. If you can submit a finished draft, a clean proof, a stable feature, then let the output speak for itself. No artifact, no update. The work itself becomes the sole vehicle for communication. This forces you to actually cross the finish line before you go looking for praise.
Okay, now moving up to that executive level, we borrow a tool from Sam Walton. Schedule unannounced audits.
This is about building an internal standard of integrity. You review your own work or your team's output like a skeptical outsider, like a customer just walking in unannounced.
Ask yourself, what's confusing? What's slow or broken or missing?
Exactly. Run a customer walkthrough of your own product before you talk about how great it is. Look for the things that cannot be faked or polished for a performance. This makes you optimize for reality, not for a presentation.
And finally, a really essential cognitive tactic for anyone doing long-term creative work. Separate makers from commentators.
Dedicate specific time and even physical space just for production. That's the attic study mentality. When you're writing or coding or building, you are a maker. You create, you explore, you make messes.
You reserve the commentary for later.
You reserve commentary, editing, review, even your own self-criticism for later dedicated time slots. When you mix those two roles, the commentator in your head will inevitably talk the maker out of doing the work before it even has a sturdy shape.
These tactical moves really do represent a full framework for deep work. It moves from a philosophical idea to very granular actions. But let's make it even simpler for immediate application.
Right. Let's boil this all down to 3 micro steps that you, the listener, can implement right now to start building that muscle of quiet persistence.
Number 1, write one sentence privately that defines your next immediate verifiable proof.
It should look like this. The next deliverable I can show is blank. Make it concrete. A completed executive summary, a stable beta module, a proofread chapter outline. This focuses all your energy on the artifact, not the adjective.
Number 2, create a proof folder. This could be a literal folder on your desk or just a digital one, and add one tangible artifact to it every single work session.
This creates an undeniable internal record of your progress. You can't cheat the folder. It counteracts that internal anxiety that you aren't moving fast enough because you have evidence accumulating daily, visible only to you.
And number 3, probably the most challenging one for retraining that social signaling muscle. Go 7 days without narrating effort.
This means if anyone asks, how's that project going? You cannot describe the hours or the difficulty or your exhaustion. You describe the output or you just defer the question.
And if you slip up,
If you slip up and you start talking about how hard you're grinding or how late you worked, you just restart the 7-day count. No shame. It's about building the muscle of quiet persistence 1 week at a time.
we started this whole deep dive with Emerson's idea of work that thunders. If we summarize the 2 big maxims we've learned today, they really provide a powerful directive for anyone who's pursuing true achievement.
Maxim 1. Keep your hard work quiet until it has a shape that can speak for itself. You have to shield the flame until it becomes a torch.
And maxim 2. Stop broadcasting effort. Start submitting proof.
In a world that is just saturated with performance and signaling, where we are constantly diluting our focus and wasting our motivational energy on social engagement, the ability to build and deliver quietly is the ultimate competitive advantage. It's the path to a robust, self-driven motivation that bypasses that fragile, unreliable need for external applause.
You've heard these stories. Of Wiles surviving 2 periods of painful, necessary silence. Of Einstein using a bureaucracy as cognitive camouflage to submit world-changing theories. Of Kuman Acton, who built a massive global utility on a foundation of being anti-glamour. And of Walton, who checked standards instead of trusting reports.
They all mastered the discipline of silence. Not as a personality quirk, but as a mandatory strategic step toward massive, undeniable achievement.
Now it's your turn to apply these tools.
So, our final provocative thought for you to carry forward this week is this. Which project are you currently narrating because you subconsciously seek comfort and that premature reward? What fundamental change would be forced in your process, your focus, and your ultimate output if you went entirely silent for the next 30 days and were only allowed to submit undeniable proof at the end?